Well, it happened in phases, and the first piece was back in 1973. It was May, and my wife had just signed up for discourses, which I had no idea what they were. She'd gone to a couple of tape seminars. I didn't know about those, but she signed me up. And the first one of these discourses arrived. This was back in the days of the 8.5 by 11 mimeographed. You could see the old school teacher in JR back then. So I read this first discourse, and I just looked at Carol, and I said, who is this guy? I mean, he read the Bible, he took the S training, hell, he probably took my training. I kind of thought I was hot shot back then. And he just wrote it all down. I mean, what a bunch of crap. And I threw it on the floor in front of her, kind of melodramatically. Well, these things came every month, only I didn't notice because Carol was just keeping them. So now you fast forward, it was 1976, and we were spring cleaning, and I came across this stack of discourses. I go, what's that? It's your discourses. What do you mean? Oh, you keep these? Yeah, they keep coming. Those are yours. I went, oh, what is it this jerk had to say? And I opened the first discourse again. And I started to read it, and I went, oh, that can't be the same thing. She said, well, look, did you sign it? Because back then I signed and dated everything I read. There it was. I said, well, then who changed the words? And that was the first time I knew this JR character had something interesting going on. And then immediately on the heels of that, I'd been to a couple of tape seminars populated by the weirdest people on the planet. I mean, whoa, this is up in Northern California, so it was weird. In any case, I went to a live seminar at the Unity Church in Berkeley. And by then I had connected into what these discourses were. I read all 3 years of them in 6 weeks. Didn't know about spiritual indigestion. So I'm there in this seminar, and Jared hones in and makes eye contact with me and kind of hold it for a while. And I kind of hear this inner message about, well, we're supposed to connect and all this kind of stuff. And so he finishes the seminar, he gets up, I get up, and I make a beeline for the door because he's making a line for the door. Well, it must have taken me 9 seconds to get to the door. By the time I got out there, he's already in a limo coming down the street. Now, it's physically impossible that he could have done that, except it's JR, so he did it. And that was the either further cement to the fact, hey, man, what is this guy? Who is this guy? So then I write him a letter about a year later saying, hey, I think I could help with this, translating the spiritual teachings into day-to-day life. So, don't get me wrong, I got nothing to do with the spiritual stuff. That's all fine, I'm sure. But man, these people, they can't seem to make life happen at all. And so he wrote back, surprisingly, and he said, sure, let's talk about it. And that's how Insight Seminars came to be. And we set it up intentionally so that it would be about practical things in the day-to-day world, yet compatible with the teachings of MSIA. But I'm a Presbyterian ministers in my family, so I said, let's make this compatible with that. And hey, how about the Jews of the world? And how about the Muslims of the world? And how about the Buddhists of the world? So Insight was set up, to me, in the basis of real spiritual teaching, not religiosity, or as JR would say, churchianity. And that's really kind of where we got going. So now let's fast forward. I'm in these seminars, and JR's teaching them with me, and we're having this great rock and roll time with people all over the world. And then about 6, 8, 9 months into it, in his seminars, I start hearing him using some of the language I've been using in these seminars. And I kind of went in and said, well, you know, at least he's stealing from the best. Still had that ego thing going. Well, now, fast forward another year or so, and now I start hearing these old tapes back from 70 and 71 before I even knew JR. And there were the exact phrases that I thought I had made up for these trainings. So that was kind of a little hop, skip, and jump of getting acquainted with JR. I can remember so many different events in seminars, times when I was being swept into the Spirit, and I could see, I have this way of checking about whether I'm in or out of tune with what's going on, just by how I close my eyes and I see a certain light pattern that shows up. And this light pattern was all over the place. And I was seeing all the auras in the room and coming out of people's feet. And I'm just transfixed in there, and JR just reaches over, and there's a photograph of this taking place in, I think it was an Insight 3, and it was up in upstate New York. I think I still have the photograph. And he reaches over and he just touches my knee. And he says, "Russell, you've got this one." And boom. It's like, whoa, wait a minute. And then my spiritual blessing, in my ministerial blessing, is that I think clearly, speak clearly, act clearly, as long as I don't try. And that was the moment that I got what this ministerial blessing was. You don't have to think. In fact, if I do think, I screw it up. So just be present. And then I knew what JR meant about spirit whispers, or however he says that about it. It's like this is coming in from another place, and I'm just opening my mouth, and out come the words. Well, there were so many of those that JR started saying we really had to put a microphone on when I was talking too, because this stuff would come through. And they'd ask me, say that again. I say what? Because I had no clue. But I definitely know that that was that little connection, or that big connection with this spirit. Now, every once in a while, he's about as boring as anything you can imagine. You know, steak and potatoes, but not that much flavor, please. And then he's all over the map. You know, every once in a while he'll go into, salsa. I remember salsa events. And I go, "Yeah, there's onions there." "Yeah, but it doesn't matter right now." And then I remember being at I can't tell you how many dinners with what we just called the guys. And we'd have a alcoholic beverage. It might have been a margarita, was kind of a big one at the time, maybe a glass of wine. And JR would distract somebody, and then he'd just wave his hand over the drink. And basically what was happening was denaturing it. You know, it's just whoosh, there's no alcoholic content anymore. So guys would then start watching out for JR while he's distracting somebody, so they could all protect the drinks, lest he go whoosh and make them less potent. Guess he never hit any of mine. Now, I remember a time up in Portland, Oregon. We were up there to do a seminar. We went to dinner, and this was one of those odd events after having spent every day for months with JR from early morning to late at night. We go on this trip, and all of a sudden it's two cars. I'm driving the second car with just the equipment. And when we get to the airport, they're all in one part of the plane and I'm on another one. And then so you get the story. So finally, it's getting past dinner time and no one's called. So I just went out and I just tuned in. He called it ranging, and I found them. "Oh, well, come on in. We were wondering where you were. Sit down." And so about to take the orders, and the waitress shows up, and JR says, "Okay, so whatever we do here, there's no onions, garlic, or pork for him. No onion, garlic, or pork for him." No, and he just points to everybody at the table. And when he gets to me, he says, "Doesn't matter for him. We're not that close." So I kind of looked at that, and I went, "Well, you know, I'll have the French onion soup, please." And guys' jaws hit the table. But for me, it was like, hey, he said it was okay, so okay, I'll go with it.
You were showing to others.
So JR helped me in so many ways before we even started Insight, just clearing patterns and karma and bringing awareness to me in ways that I had not previously been open to. In fact, I remember him very clearly saying to me one day, "You know, Russell, the information's available to you, but are you available to the information?" And that one just really stuck with me. And it became a hallmark of the work that I do with people. It's not about telling someone, it's not about hammering someone, it's not about me waking them up, it's just about making the information available. And then as they respond, sometimes that same line is there. "Hey, the information's available. Are you available to it?" Now, if I do that with judgment, it doesn't work so good. But if I just do it as, "Hey, that's what's so," then there's a great opportunity for people to expand and to open. After about 10 years or so of Insight, JR put his metaphysical foot in my back, in the seat of my pants, grabbed me by the collar, did everything he could to chuck me out and send me out into the world. Now, I thought it was somewhere between punishment and abuse, but what it really was preparation, which I slowly began to figure out. The idea was, hey, if I spend all my time preaching to the choir doesn't need any more preaching. But how about going out and bringing this message of awareness and upliftment to people who don't know necessarily that's what they're looking for, but when they hear it, they resonate. And so I very clearly remember doing a personal productivity training. We called it the MAP seminar. Today would be David Allen's GTD, Getting Things Done. And I mean, it's just all about completion and keeping your agreements and managing all the things you said you're going to do and how do you organize it. And this woman came up to me on the break, just looked me square in the eyes and says, "You're doing the Lord's work, aren't you?" And we hadn't said a word about spirit or anything else, but yet the energy of that shone through. And that's been, I think, a hallmark for what I do. I started writing all these columns for the Huffington Post after Ariana asked me many times, and I kept saying, "Are you crazy? I don't want to write for that." And all of a sudden one day at a conference she said, "Darling, will you write the column?" And I said yes, and I didn't even know where the yes came from. But now I see what that is as an opportunity to present this information to an audience that is so cynical and so negative, and yet they're cynical and negative because of one thing. They see a better way, they just don't know how to get into the better way. So they criticize and complain about it. So I write a lot about that and about how the complaint is simply a sign that you recognize a better way, but you don't know how to get there. So you try to complain your way into improvement. So it's a great way to put the message out to people whom, if it came in the trappings of someone with a collar or a ministerial badge in front of them, would get rejected out of hand. Yeah. So Gary Krebs, who is the publisher of the business section for McGraw-Hill's books, contacted me and said, "Would you write a book for us, a business book, that talks about these themes in business? And we'd like to call it Workarounds That Work." And I went, And I didn't know what that meant at first, but it clicked into place as I tuned inwardly. I said, oh, workarounds that work. How to conquer anything that stands in your way. At work was this book. But for me it was, how do you conquer anything that stands in your way, period. And what's a workaround? A workaround is a way to get moving when you get stalled. Kind of like the sailboat, the mast breaks, they call a workaround a jury rig. You put up a temporary mast and it's not perfect, but it gets you going. Well, that's a lot of what my translation of all of this work is when you get stuck, how do you find where you're stuck and move from it? You may not move perfectly, but you're moving. Once you're moving, you can steer. So the workarounds that work, my consulting work, the coaching work I do with executives and teams, is all about finding out where you are, where you're trying to get, and how do you get any motion. Because once it's moving again, you can steer. And that's JR's teaching in a nutshell. Not one soul will be lost. No one's off the path. Just they may not know where they are on the path. But it's not about judging the path. It's not about judging the choice someone's making. It's simply about facilitating awareness. Holding the mirror up so they can see where they are. And with that awareness, you can ask a question. How's that working? When people ask me what I do for a living these days, I look at them and I say, I help people get what they think they want as fast as possible. So I can ask them, was that it? Because it almost never is. And as soon as the person goes, that's not it, that's when the next layer of unfoldment is available to them by saying, well, geez, what do you think that would be like if you got what you're really after, not what you settle for? And then as people go in, they open to that awareness that of what they're seeking they already have, they just haven't connected to it in a long time. I think that's a big teaching that JR has shown us, is that it's like he wrote the Way Out book, it's not out, it's in. So you go in and you connect to that which already is. So before I really knew what that meant, and we were coming up with insight seminars, I called it the Awakening Heart. Becoming more of who you already are. That's a great, another summary of JR's teaching, awakening. Something that awakens was asleep, but something that was asleep was previously awake. So this is all about remembering, coming back into alignment with that which already is. So it's not about becoming different, it's about letting go of what appears to be different, so that what I already am, what we already are, can come focused, present, and full. That's, I think, what the Wayshower is all about.
So last thing, is there something you want to tell JR?
Oh, Chief. You are such a little snake. You snake into spots. You sneak into spots. You find, no matter how crusty the edge might be, you've touched my heart, you've touched my family. It's beyond words to say just how much love, joy, and expansion you've brought into my life, into the lives of many. And I'm eternally grateful that you're here on the planet and that I've had the blessing of working side by side with you.